never would
Everyone.
This is can you do a sound check, please? Can you hear me?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, well, another.
Somebody, so you're not muted with your stuff. You gotta go into your device settings on Teams and you put stuff there too.
Employer representative.
Did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get it? Nope.
Yeah.
This is actually.
The
It's because
one
my volume.
person, Sarah, who we have.
My volume.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It wasn't Nigel's volume yet. My bad.
No, you're fine. That's why we do this a little early.
Yeah.
You're just focused on.
Okay, Dave Madison.
Madison.
Rick, Dave Madison, can you hear us okay? Good. Okay, Dave, can we do a sound check with you, please?
Because he's not here. And his specialties.
Seems like. I cannot hear you, Dave. Rick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you well. Dave, I think that's probably no, I think that's on your end.
Better?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We need more people.
Yeah, I'm sure Dave is gonna show up. To be here.
That's what happens when you start inching in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Commissioner Scar is here.
Do that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually hit send.
Especially for a little burst of winter we had. That was terrible. Little sprint, winter sprint. I know. What's going on?
I planted a garden a month ago, so I was very pleased with it.
Now it can grow.
Yes. I think I got 103 plants in the ground when I put it in.
Whoa.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, here they come. Everybody's coming in right on time.
Hello.
Good morning.
You never know.
I put my name in the back so I can sign myself.
You guys have a packet in front of you, but don't skip ahead on the slides. You can look at everything else now if you'd like to peruse, but yeah, no, there's like pop quizzes and stuff in there, so.
Really tempted today.
Yeah.
Moving on the dot,
All right.
or 9 on the dot, excuse me. Somewhere it is, somewhere.
So should we get started? I'm assuming that you want me to.
If that's all right.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to our Housing Commission meeting on June 6th. And we are going ahead and starting with our welcome and introductions. So I'm gonna go ahead and go around the room and I'm gonna start with Parker today.
Hello, my name is Parker Sammons and I'm the Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Dave Bennett, South County Representative.
Mark Kestner, North County Representative.
Carrie Fleischer, member at large.
Kristen Koptiak, member at large based in Rockaway.
Chris Lockenmeyer, major employer representative.
Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development.
All right, then I'm gonna transition to the members online and then we'll go around the room and greet our guests.
Dave Madison, member at large, Bay City.
Rick
Aaron.
Hinkes from Encore Investments, Manzanita.
Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner.
Anyone else online would like to introduce themselves?
Mary Johnson, planner with Rockaway.
Terry Cooper, EDC Director.
Marlisa De Jesus, Houseless Action Network.
All right. And people, guys here in the room, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Bruce Brandy, independent, attendee.
Yeah, friends, also. That's the band.
Again, Commissioner-elect.
Great. Thanks for coming today. All right, moving on, we have a mission minute. Is there anybody today that would like to bring anything up?
I'd just like to say that I've gone through a period of going through a lot of travel, and I'm really happy to be on the other end of it. It's been very productive, but I'm really excited to be back here and getting back to the grindstone on my office work.
Great. I actually do have a few things that really isn't on the agenda, but I wanted to bring up. I did have the fortune to go see several of the projects recently. One in Garibaldi, the forget the name of the it's Garibaldi Baby Apartments, the 18 units. I did tour. They have 1-bedroom apartments. They're just starting leasing. They're running about $1,500 a month. And I did get some great information that I passed on to Parker to hopefully go to the finance committee on what they're currently, what they perceived as lending, like a 1.35 debt to expense ratio, or income to expense ratio, excuse me, and about a 65% loan to value. Is what they perceived as kind of banking minimums to get financing. So I found that quite interesting. So I wanted to pass that along. Just to, because I think that kind of opens at least opened my eyes on exactly what the barriers are for even market-based apartments. And even at $1,500, that falls into line kind of with at about 100% to 120% AMI, which is still workforce housing. So I just wanted to pass that along. And then in addition to that, I just wanted to bring up, we had the assessor's office unfortunately recently had to deny an exemption application for the supportive housing here in Tillamook County. And I wanted to bring that to the Housing Commission's attention, that housing no longer qualifies under nonprofit charitable status. That was due to a Oregon tax court decision, which is precedent setting, that basically said housing, because they have tenant rights, a tenant can live there, basically living on site no longer qualifies for tax exemption under charitable. So it has to be especially, that's why we see so many other housing exemption programs. There is one out there, but it has to be for low income, less than 60% of AMI.
Interesting.
And it has to be similar to our multifamily housing exemption program.
I see.
So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. There is a special assessment program that they can get contracted their income based on their contracted rents if they are under specific programs of financing through Oregon Housing Authority, or not, or is it? Yes, thank you. So many acronyms to follow. But there are special assessment programs, so they will still end up paying property tax. So I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention, or the commission's attention. And is there anybody else that has a mission?
I would share just quickly, I had the opportunity to go and testify for Ledge Days for the House Housing Committee. So that was an opportunity just to get in front of our legislators as they're starting to think about within the Housing Committee for the House, what kind of bills they may want to create as committee bills, et cetera. So just a good opportunity to continue to put out there what's special and different about how we do this in Tillamook County. And I look forward to working with the Legislative Committee to see if there's something we want to push forward this session. We'll need to know that by September and have either Senator Weber or Representative Javity on board to move something forward. So let's start thinking about that if we haven't already. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on, is there any public comment today? Anybody in the room? Anybody online? Seeing no raised hand, I think we'll move on. So we have a July 4th Housing Commission.
Actually, I'm going to adjust the agenda a little bit.
Please do.
Rick has asked to go a little bit earlier, and so
Great.
I think we'll just dive right into the Manzanita project update and invite Rick Hinks on to tell us a little bit about what's going on up there. And then Sarah, I believe he'll need to be able to share his screen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. I appreciate the adjustment too. Thank you, folks. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
And let's see about this screen thing.
I think she's giving it to you right now. There you go. You should now have the ability to share your screen.
Okay, let's see here. Share. And okay, entire screen. Are you getting it is the question.
We are.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, can you hear me again? My screen froze there for a minute.
We can still hear you, but I don't think you're showing us the right screen. There it is. That's good. And from the beginning on the left is the button you're looking for. You switched screens back to showing us the Zoom.
Okay, first of all, I can't hear anybody there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, that's interesting. I stopped my sharing. Let's try this again.
We can see your screen.
Okay, so you saw, all right, you saw that. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can get this volume going. I don't understand what's happening because I can't hear anybody. If you have a question, I'm not going to hear it.
Rick, can you
But I'll
hear
tell
us
you what, how
online?
about this? Give me a thumbs up. I'll just dive in, get this done, and we can save the questions. And if anybody has anything later, they can ask. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, I see a nodded head. Thank you, folks. Fun. Apparently, I'm technologically challenged. All right, here we go. All right, so Jim Pence and I make up Encore Investments. We're a couple of retired guys that have had a connection to Manzanita since the 80s. And we have had an opportunity to get involved with and purchase 70 acres of land and have been working on this project now since 2015. I won't go into a bunch of details on that. It doesn't really matter. But essentially, our goal was to provide housing of different products and different types for the people of Manzanita, since 70 acres is a significant portion of the future land, excuse me, land available in Manzanita for residential housing. So starting there, the challenge was, we first built a development called Highlands at Manzanita, and it was basically custom homes. But we wanted to put in the different types of products. So the challenge was that something that I really don't need to explain to anybody here in the meeting, that there is an existing deficit for the missing middle and workforce housing. We'll leave it there. You can probably explain it better to me than I could to you. We have approximately 80% of available residential land within the UGB in Manzanita. We felt like we needed to be good stewards of that land, since it really controls a lot of what the current future of residential housing means in the city, and for that matter, the area. So we had committed to providing a range of products to meet the future. And we had completed, or at least already started and mostly completed Highlands, and wanted to turn our attention to a different type of housing. The lack of affordable housing, again, I don't have to tell this group anything about this, but specifically in Manzanita, it has led to business closures. It's led to major changes in businesses, and it is simply not a good situation. So we applied. So just to give you an idea of what's going on with this vicinity map, the outline on the major outline in yellow here is our total property. Highlands takes up this upper left corner. The shaded area is the proposed location for workforce and other housing. I actually have a slide coming up with some pictures. It's a beautiful area, very serene, very nice, and just frankly a good place to live. We've applied to the Planning Commission for rezoning of 12.5 acres on the northeast corner of the property because it's zoned R2 and we cannot build anything that's multifamily. So therefore, we applied. They recommended it to the city council. And as of the time I made this presentation, it said we are waiting to be approved. I'm happy to report that that happened yesterday. And the city council unanimously approved the recommendation from the Planning Commission. And it looks like we are on our way to dedicate 12.5 acres to affordable workforce and middle housing, not subject to short-term rentals and deed restricted for the purpose. And we're really excited about that. This slide is, or this picture is actually the location of where one of the two people that we have partnered with will build. We have expertise in all facets of development, but the fact of the matter is, I said we're a couple of old retired guys, and that is true. We made our career in manufacturing and for fluidic systems that, believe me, I won't go into because you'll all fall asleep. But basically, we were not developers. My partner retired many years ago and did a lot of development work. I retired 10 years ago, and he called me up and said, hey, let's do this thing. And we knew a little bit about housing, and he knew a lot about development, thank God. So we started to do this. For this project, we're focusing on providing the land at a price that our partner developers can afford so that they can do the project, and assisting on infrastructure. Frankly, my partner's as good as they come at building infrastructure, and it's to everyone's advantage to have him involved. So we're going to do that. We have two development partners. They will provide the housing, the design, the building, the operational aspects, the whole shot. One you should all know, and that's Home First Greenlight. They built the Willett Apartments in Tillamook and are one of the larger and more experienced builders here. They're looking to build 60 units in multifamily structures targeted at 60% AMI, with 12 units in the 30% range. Maker is a new company, not new to development or architecture, but new to this area. They're very aggressive and very zealous on what they would like to do, which we like. They have another project that they're calling Highlands Apartments that will build 34 units in phase 1. This says another 34 in phase 2. That's actually up in the air at the moment. Now they're looking maybe 36 in phase 1 and 30 in phase 2, but it's a moving target at the moment as they work on their financing. This is targeted at 80 to 120% of AMI. I will tell you that the reason that I like this, Parker has been an incredible resource, and we had a wonderful conversation, and it occurred to me that as, you know, the goal here is to help people. And as people go through their housing needs and maybe start off at a 30% voucher subsidized or government subsidized apartment, and let's just assume that we're successful and these people do really well and they move on, and now they're in a different aspect and they want to move up in their life, and now they go to the 60. I like the fact that we will actually have all of those areas covered from 30 to 60 to 80 to 120, and it would be fun. And we certainly pray that people will follow that and work through all of that, and be able to go from a 30% AMI to 120% AMI because of the help that they're getting and their own individual ambitions. The Home First development seen here in a rendering is going to consist of 5 buildings, 12 units per building. You can see a community center. One of the things that we told our partners was that it is important to us. This is sitting basically 1 meadow over from the Highlands development. And the Highlands development right now, homes in that area are 850,000 to now one that's getting built will probably end up being about 3 million. So this is a neighborhood that is a premier neighborhood in Manzanita. And the idea was that we want every person who lives in this area, either the Home First development or the Maker development, we want them to be as proud of where they live and going home to it as any of the people in Highlands. And the idea behind that is that we told them these buildings have to be beautiful. They have to find a way to make this happen. Both companies assure us they can. We're excited to see what they're going to do. Maker has come in. This I don't know how well you can see the picture in the background, but that is a rendering of their portion of the development. Their development will enter off Nicarni, for those of you knowing Manzanita, and the road will continue to the north, and that will bring people to the Home First development. Going back real quickly, Nicarni is here in red. The entrance will be here, and then there'll be what we're calling Loop Road that will actually come up and connect to a road that we've already put in that goes all the way down to both Nicarni and Classic Street in Manzanita. So that is where the 2 developments are going to go. We also have, since those 2 projects will only occupy about 10 acres, we've got another 2.5 acres. And this picture is actually the acreage that will be left over. And as you can see, it's a pretty nice piece of land, and it's got some views for some people that might live on the top floor. The remaining land is available for another project. Both of our current partners have tried to lay claim to it, and we're telling them basically, okay, I'll tell you what, why don't you just focus on what you're doing? And we'll talk about more later. But we do have more. If you look at the density allowed at 13 units per acre in Manzanita, we will be able to build approximately 170 units by the time this is done. And that is, in fact, the goal. With that, I will stop sharing so that I can hear you folks, I hope, and take any questions that you might have. So first of all, let me find out why I can't hear you, because that makes no sense to me. Everything is on.
Check. Can you hear us now, Rick? Can you hear us? No. I think it's probably your volume. Rick, you could pop out of the meeting and join again. I guess you can't hear me say that, so I can text it to you.
And that might work.
Everything is on. I cannot find a thing. So if you don't mind, I am going to leave and come back to the meeting. Maybe the reset will help. So I'll be back in a bit. Apologies.
Technology is fun. We're 4 years out of the pandemic and we still haven't figured this out.
Well, while he pops out and comes back in, do you want to just have a quick discussion about 4th of July?
Absolutely. So the July 4th is the next Housing Commission meeting. And we should be considering if we want to meet, if we want to move the meeting, if we want to Do whatever you want. Rick, can you hear us now?
I can. I don't know what happened, but somehow I lost all my audio, but I'm back. And if you can hear me, I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. Well, we'll revisit that when we get to it. We'll take questions now for Rick if anybody has any.
It just froze.
And Rick, you might just want to turn your video off. I think your internet's a little slow.
All right. I think my internet hates me today.
Yeah, that bad internet days are rough. Also online is Stephen Wade from Maker, and if you have any questions for him, he'd be happy to take them as well.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Parker.
So Rick, we really appreciate you making that land available for Maker and Home First. That's a significant project that's going to make a big difference in the county. And as you know, those two developers have received grants from the Housing Commission. Is there anything else the Housing Commission can do for you to help with any particular roadblocks or problems you're having?
Did you hear that, Rick?
Oh no.
Uh-oh. Steve, you want to take that question?
Yeah, you know what? Folks, I'm going to turn off my camera because that will hopefully help with some of the bandwidth issues and whatnot. So see if I can do this thing here. Okay, now I can hear you. If you want to repeat the question, hopefully this will allow me to stay on.
No, we appreciate making that land available for low income, middle income, workforce housing. That's going to be a significant factor in increasing our housing production. As you know, Home First and Maker both received grants or loans from the county. Is there anything else the Housing Commission can do for you to help with any particular issues you're having as a landowner?
We're working with the city. The city of Manzanita was awarded $0.7 million for infrastructure, and my partner, as the guy who is the infrastructure guru, is working with them to see what we can do. As we understand it right now, that
Oh no.
this is frustrating. My apologies, folks. I live in the country, and it looks like there's a problem today. But nonetheless, we do not expect that any of that those funds will fall to having us do any of the infrastructure specifically related to from the road to our development, either Steve's and Makers or Ben Prey and HFD.
And I'll elaborate on that a little bit, Rick. The city of Manzanita plans on using those infrastructure funds to replace a 8-inch pipe with a 10-inch pipe. And that will increase the capacity and allow for these buildings to go in, but will not be the infrastructure for them specifically. This is not the water line up to where they are. This is adding the capacity so that line could be added. But at this point, the development partners are on the hook for the infrastructure, for a lot of the infrastructure of this project. And I believe that where Rick is going with this is that is where we could help, is by searching for help for the city of Manzanita to have more infrastructure capacity.
Yeah, can I chime in, Parker?
Please.
Yeah, Steve from Maker. Good morning, everyone. Yes, you are correct. I believe the bill that ourselves and the other developer are looking at is approximately $1.3 million for infrastructure. This is, stuff that normally when you, I guess I don't want to say normally, but most of the time when you develop, you already have the utilities at the street, et cetera. So you're not having to bring water and sewer, all the way up a hill to a site. Obviously, this is, of concern to both of us, both developers, because this does affect already our pretty tight underwriting, to have to come up with this additional funding. Because there's already, with that site, there's already a lot of topography there that we're going to have to, flatten out and work with in addition to this other cost. So I think, what Rick is trying to do and what we're trying to do is find funding to absorb the public infrastructure portion of the development, not the private, not what would be for each individual developer, such as like parking or just moving land around, flattening it, etc., but actually for the sewer and the water. Hopefully that made sense.
Is that bringing the utilities around in Kearney, or are they not even there?
Do you know what
Yes.
the current utilities are? Rick, you want to take that?
Okay. Am I back?
You are.
Yep.
Oh, Lord, this is maddening. The utilities are in Kearney, and in fact, that's part of what's going on. Is there's a loop that needs to be created that would be the best way to do this, and they're looking at how to do that now, and bringing a 10-inch line down Classic Street and then looping it all the way down to Kearney where they would have to make the connection is in fact so expensive that we're being told at the moment that the 2.7 won't even be enough, and the city's going to have to kick in some money as well. So, this is not a complaint. It's not a problem. The city is doing exactly what they need to be doing with that money. It's not. I hope you can hear me. You're frozen again.
We can hear you. Thumbs up all around. Steve, you want to chime in?
Anyway, wow.
I
Okay, shut up now.
I think what Rick's trying to say is, they're working with the city to try to absorb some of this, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be a possibility. And I'm not sure I have all the details on this. Rick could probably speak to this better, but I think the hope was when Manzanita received that $2+ million, some of it could be used for the public sewer water infrastructure for these two development sites. But if that's not the case, then that puts both developer groups in a position of trying to figure out, where are we going to get this additional money to run water and sewer to this site. So I guess, in summation, if the county can help with that, I mean, that would be huge. Whether it's, I mean, I've worked with Parker pretty closely. I know there's not a lot of funding available, but maybe there are other folks that you work with out there that would be interested in partnering up or being part of this to help absorb that cost. I don't know.
Thank you, Steve.
What do you think, Parker? You tell me.
I mean, we keep looking for new sources. We were hoping that the OFA would have their program online. It sounds like they are still getting it set up, but I know that they have communicated with Steve directly and keeping him in the loop, as well as myself. And as soon as that gets online, that is a fund that could apply $500,000 to each of these projects in the form of low interest loans. For pre-development. So it is a short-term loan of 0.5% to 3%, and it gets paid back when the bank financing gets in place. So that's kind of the type of funds they need, but they need more than what the OFA is going to offer. And we will have to continue to look for different sources or find a legislative solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. In the OFA, and I did speak with Gwen at OFA yesterday, and they're working through that and trying to draw up contracts that they're going to be sending you, Parker, to review. And then I guess your step would be then to reach out to the appropriate parties who qualify for this. But just, even if there's more funding available, it's still both developer groups then. It's like we're borrowing it, but we have to pay it back. So that doesn't really solve the problem, right? Because now the tab just went up another $1.5 million or whatever for this project. So it's not, if it was a forgivable loan or a grant that we could apply to it, that would be different because then we could wipe it off the table. But it's still, it's still something when we go to do our, Fannie Freddie financing or whatever to hold these projects, it's still a cost we have to, absorb. And because our rents are not above 100 AMI, and I know the other project is even lower, the banks will only loan us so much money based on our income we have coming in. So they have a whole calculation that they do. So, we can only borrow so much money. So yeah, the grants, the forgivable loans are huge to get these type of housing projects built. They really are.
I believe we're about 30. Let me follow up on a couple of things Steve said. One, the OFA is looking at passing their fund financing through the Housing Commission. They would like us to be the pass-through entity for their funding because they don't want to be reviewing projects in Tillamook County from Portland. They assume that we know what we're doing, and we do. So that is how they would like to, if things continue on the current path, that is how we will be taking those funding down. And I will be including that into the scope of work with our agreement with Polback. And we're hoping that they will be able to help us administer that pretty complicated loan, a low interest loan that is a gap loan that needs to get paid back soon. And so we're working through all of that, but we're hoping that they will have the capacity and they'll make it really easy for us to just evaluate and do what we do.
I did have I guess a base question. Where are the infrastructure charges coming from that we're talking about? Is it SDCs from Manzanita? The actual, what needs to be done in percentages?
So I think that there's a few things, and I'll let Steve dive into this after I give my overview of it. But there's a few pieces of infrastructure that both projects need, and that's things like the road and the water loop that Rick was describing. And then there is infrastructure that each project needs specific to it. And that's, parking and running the water line from that new road to the building and the sewer, et cetera. Those are costs that are typically absorbed by the developer. But the road, the sewer, the big water, getting that loop in is the type of infrastructure that the city should be participating in and we should be supporting. So that seems to be the linchpin of this project right now, is one of the big hurdles to overcome, is finding the support from Manzanita to get the rest of that infrastructure in, hopefully while they're doing their enlargement of their water line.
And typically, if you have a development proposal and it's accessed by a public road that is not yet improved, we have roads platted all over the county and in the cities that haven't been paved. There's no infrastructure. Those costs to even do those public improvements are typically the responsibility of the developer. The development laws usually contain some sort of wording that the developer is also responsible to make whatever improvements or enhancements to serve the proposed development. So that's where this is all coming into play, is it's the cost to bring the loop and the water and the sewer and the roads to the private property development itself, along with those improvements Manzanita has deemed needed to serve it.
So pieces would be road, sewer, water.
Right.
Both on and off the property.
And to give you an example of this, and Dave, Madison, please jump in if I get any of this wrong. But for example, in Bay City, if you are just wanting to build your home, so you're the developer and you want to build it at the top of a hill and there is a road platted there, you would have to pay for the road to go all the way up to your spot.
Mhm.
But as houses get developed on the road that you built, you get paid back some of it as they buy in and they pay for the infrastructure that you built. In some scenarios, but this is just an example of, who's responsible for what and how it gets passed along as other entities utilize the same infrastructure.
Yep, you got that.
Thank you.
Now, and here's the catch. If there's an unimproved road that goes by a number of houses and you're building at the end on a lot, you have to improve that whole road in front of all those houses and you won't get reimbursed. So that's the catch there.
It depends. It's situational.
Mhm.
Now, is there also going to be I think there's a isn't there a Senate bill coming out to identify more grants for infrastructure improvements? Isn't that coming out in late June? If I'm correct?
There is, and there's also the revolving loan fund that
Right.
HCS will be administering, and they're developing the rulemaking on that right now.
Yep. Thanks.
Steve, question for you.
Yes.
Are your bank lenders talking at all about any pre-leasing requirements prior to funding?
Great question. Our goal, well, go ahead.
Steve, we're actually going to have a whole pre-leasing conversation coming up here in just a minute. So I think it might be better if you hang out for our meeting. I'd love to have you jump in on that portion of the conversation, if that's all right, Dave. Cool.
Yeah, I can hang out until you need me to chime off.
That'll be our next topic coming right up, but I don't want to skip ahead too far. I told you I had pop quizzes for you, so. Any other questions for Rick or Steve while we have them? Well, again, Rick, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and for deeding this property to affordable and middle income housing. It's we see that you see the need. I don't think anybody doesn't understand the problem, and we see your contributions to the solution. Appreciate it. And I'll just assume he could hear that.
I don't think he did.
I don't think so.
Well, thank you, guys. We're going to move on now. All right. Now it is my turn to share my screen. Okay. So I have a few updates to report to the commission. The first is that the 80 to 120% AMI table has been published. You can find that in your packet. It is not in the slides, but the separate document. We're going to go over some terms and definitions in housing, affordable housing, et cetera, because there's been a lot of confusion, and I think it's something that we all need to at least examine what our views on each term is and make sure that we're all speaking the same language.
Can you tell the online people that it's online?
Yes, all of these documents are available at the Housing Commission website, the Tillamook County Housing Commission. If you search for that, you will be the first link on Google, and those documents are at the bottom of the page. Then we're going to have a conversation about pre-leasing and its role in workforce housing. And then we just have a couple of housekeeping items, such as that July 4th Housing Commission meeting, et cetera. So to begin, I'd like to show you all the I can. Oh, I'm having trouble. Here we go. I think it should catch up to me in just a moment. Yep. Here is a PDF version. This is available in both Excel and PDF of the 2024 Tillamook County AMI numbers. And I'd like to briefly tell you guys, why is that? Do I need to try and share again?
Or maybe just expand?
Here we go. There we are. So I wanted to explain the methodology a little bit and explain area median income a little more. As I continue to learn more about housing, I continue to expand and deepen my understanding of these terms. So I'm going to share with you guys what I've learned about area median income. So when HUD sets the area median income, they begin with the median family income. And when I first started, people told me that median family income and 100% AMI were the same thing, but they are not. And how HUD begins their calculation is they take the median family income, which is $76,400 in Tillamook County for 2024. They then take half of that and to get the very low income of 50%. And from there, they make an adjustment up with 10% increments of AMI. And by the time you adjust up to 100% AMI, you are actually above the median family income. And you can see that a 100% income for a family of 4, this is 100% AMI of Tillamook County. And you see that it is $80,900, not that $76,000. And that is a little different because we begin at 50%. Anybody want to guess why they begin at 50%? It took me a while to get a hold of this. It's to protect the low income from high income growth. So if you begin at 50% of 100% of MFI, that means that any high-end wage growth is only going to affect the calculation by 50%. It's going to be 50% less weight on pulling up. And so that helps to keep those rent numbers more reasonable and in line with need. The other thing that's interesting is on these, when you move to the left, you drop by, I believe, 10% for each person. But when you move to the right past 4 people, it only grows by 8%. And I'm telling you all of this because I had to have conversations all the way up to a senior policy analyst at HUD, along with OHCS. I just started emailing everybody who could tell me anything about AMI, basically saying, hey, what's the math on 80 to 120% AMI? And people responded with, well, we can tell you what we think it's going to be. And so this is part of the discussion because we really are continuing to be like 1/2 step at least ahead of a lot of other organizations because we have been talking about 80 to 120% AMI for a long time, and other people haven't even figured out what the math is on that yet. So we do know what it is now. OHCS will be following HUD's lead. HUD has provided me the math for middle income AMI. It's a little different than the 60 to 80% range, which is why I did not include the 60 to 80% on this spreadsheet. That is on a separate document, also on the county webpage, and it'll take you straight to HUD's affordable housing numbers. And I didn't want to display them anything other than how HUD displays them. Affordable housing developers know what it means. And there's not a lot of benefit from trying to display that number anywhere in any other format than how HUD presents it. So those are the AMI numbers. Does anybody have any questions about that?
What number of people do you have on your 1 and 2 person, 3 person? Is that the 1.5 people?
So if it is,
room?
the persons and bedrooms are aligned. So a studio bedroom is considered 1 person. A 1 bed is considered, I believe 1.5 people. It goes up by half people increments all the way. And then also on the spreadsheet version, there is a quick AMI tool, and you can see that at the bottom of this. If anybody does download the Excel document from the county webpage, you will be able to edit this. And this is just a tool so that you can see what the hourly wage is and how it translates into an AMI. So you can see that $25 is an hour translates to roughly 92% AMI for a party of 1. And you can adjust those numbers so you can see what 33.50 is or whatever it is. You can calculate it down to the minutia.
And Parker, what does unburdened rent mean?
Good question. So a lot of our goals are to make sure that people are not rent burdened. And you are rent burdened when you are paying more than 30% of your paycheck into your housing. And if you are paying 50% of your income to housing, you are considered to be severely rent burdened. The goal is always to be having available housing that is available 3 times your income. So when developers go out, this will be part of our pre-leasing conversation, but they are basically trying to figure out what people can pay, and they will set rents and build accordingly, is what we're kind of hearing. So Again, this will be part of our pre-leasing conversation coming up
And
next.
that's 30% of gross wages, not net.
Correct. No, net.
It's net.
It's net.
After
After,
taxes.
no, it's gross.
No,
That's gross.
gross.
Pardon me, gross.
Okay.
Yeah. But also relevant to our pre-leasing discussion. So, I wanted to,
Michelle has a question.
oh, Michelle, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Sorry I'm not there in person today. I just wanted to mention that in the 2022 county health needs assessment as a data point, 30% of Tillamook households, according to census data or other data sources that are used for that report, indicate that 30% of our households in Tillamook County are rent burdened, paying more than 30%. And when taken in conjunction, and there are obviously more that are higher than that threshold of 30%. Taken with transportation and housing combined, 50% of households are rent burdened. So it's significant. It's a huge issue. And I think it's something from an outreach standpoint that we need to make sure that we're explaining to people why it matters that we're looking at income levels and rent levels from a practical standpoint, that, you know, it doesn't do any good to build new housing if people can't afford it, and then they can't afford to eat or send their kid to college or all the other things that are going to help them with their upward mobility and their long-term health and vitality. That's the only other point I thought I'd make while I'm off mute, is just I'm confused by what Parker just explained about AMI. And I don't think the average person is going to need to know that level of detail. I think it's really helpful that Parker knows it and that there's a record of facts related to it. I do not think that this is an important talking point to the public if they want to do the deep dive. I cannot imagine anyone, the average person on the street, wanting to know and understand it at this level. I think, what do they need to know? Why we calculate these things in the first place, not the algorithm specifically. That's from which the calculations come. That's just my 2 cents.
Absolutely agree. Nobody should have to go through what I did to understand AMI. That is why I'm here to give you a summary and explanation. And that's a good jumping point. So the next thing I did for this meeting to prepare was I went and looked up some job postings. And I grabbed these 3. It's a bartender, a seasonal housekeeper, and a county program manager. I've removed all of the identifying information about this, but these wages are $20, $25, and $30 wages. Here is the quick AMI tool, giving that to you in AMI, and it is 73%, 92%, and 110%. And one of the things that I keep hearing about is people accepting jobs in Tillamook County and then trying to find housing and ultimately turning down the job offer because there's not there. I wanted us to all look at why that's the case and just see what somebody, a prospective, new resident of Tillamook County would see if they wanted to take one of these jobs to come to the county. And I did that by checking what was available just on Zillow, because that's where I would start by looking. And here are the number of units that are available at each AMI level on Zillow. That's 0, 2, and 3. So that's why people are turning down job offers, because at cursory first glance, they're not finding housing. I've been here long enough to know that housing is being found on groups like Facebook for Rent and things.
And this is countywide.
This is
isn't just
countywide.
Tillamook proper. You search the entire.
This is the entire county.
Okay.
This is the entire county. And I know that most of the rentals here are not being put up on Zillow and found that way. So when I went and used all of the resources that I've learned about for being on the job in here for 9 months, I can adjust these numbers up to 3, 5, and 6. So there is, I can give you the real numbers, the more real numbers. But somebody who's moving here doesn't know this. They don't know to join the various Facebook groups. They don't know that Facebook still reigns supreme here, and things like that. So they might not have access to the housing. Paul, thank you for letting me get through that. Do you have a comment?
Just a question, if you check any other surrounding counties for comparison, just curious what goes into that.
That's a good question. I did not do that for this exercise, but I will, and I'll send that out to everybody because I think that's a good thing to compare to. But I can tell you that the AMI levels of our neighbors are much higher. They're about 20% higher. So yeah, right.
So Parker, is somebody who might want to come in and develop properties that meet these requirements?
Mhm.
What's the benefit to me?
That's a very good question. It's also part of our pre-leasing conversation in just a minute. You guys are always one step ahead of me. I love it. Like, I actually really do love that. So here's a question for you guys. What's workforce housing? What is it? Anybody, just what comes to your head? What do you think of? What do you think of from what we've talked about?
Housing that's designed for local businesses,
Housing designed for local businesses, absolutely,
bring in, workers.
right?
Nurses, teachers.
Housing for nurses, teachers,
Above a certain rent level.
certain rent levels. So all of these terms that we use, affordable housing, workforce housing, middle income, et cetera, they all have very specific meanings. And workforce housing, rent is sometimes tied to AMI, but not always. You can have workforce housing that is at 150% AMI. You generally have a partnership, though, with the employer. The developer generally has a partnership with the employer for developing workforce housing. And pre-leasing is almost always needed if you are in the middle income range of 80 to 120%. And that's one of the key features of workforce housing I have come to realize is the pre-leasing. That is the difference between something that is middle income housing and workforce housing. And workforce housing, again, can mean many different things. It is not one monolith. Missing middle. This is a term we've used a lot. This is a type of housing. It is not connected to any income level or AMI. These are ADUs, townhomes, cottage clusters, the type of housing we want. Low income housing. This is rent assistance housing. This is Section 8 or housing choice voucher housing. This is generally administered, people get their vouchers through a housing authority. And this is for less than or equal to 80% AMI. And then we have middle income. And again, middle income is just an AMI range. And rent is generally capped at 120%. If you are above that, you are not in middle income housing.
We saw some recent bills this last session for 130%.
That is why that tilde is in front of that 120%, because yes, that is a roughly 120%. That is a moving target.
Yeah.
The state continues to expand their definition of it. And again, middle income is a pretty new concept. It's been less than a decade that this has been a term that we use. And it's used to describe a new class of people. We used to have affordable housing, and beyond that, there was nothing else. It was just market rate. But we have come to learn that many people are priced out of the affordable range, but unable to obtain market rate housing. And that is how this whole term, this whole AMI range came into being, was that exact problem. And so now we have this term middle income, which really does mean the AMI range of 80 to roughly 120%. Then next, we have affordable housing. And this is the big word that gets used a lot. But what this means is rent that is 30% or less. Yes, 60% or less. I think I might have mistaken this.
No.
No, renting, no, pardon me, yes. Affordable housing simply means unburdened rent. If you are paying 30% of your paycheck or less to your rent, you are living in housing that is affordable for you. So when we say affordable housing, we mean housing that is affordable for people. When we say low income housing, we are meaning housing that is subsidized to be affordable for people. When we're talking about middle income housing, we're talking about what people can rent at the 80 to 120% AMI range. And when we talk about workforce housing, We're talking about housing that is specifically tied to an employer, a type of employee, an industry. It has some sort of partnership with business and employment. That is what makes workforce housing workforce housing.
And it's all rental. None of this is about ownership.
No, none of this is about ownership.
The mortgage isn't even okay.
No. Though you could have affordable housing if your mortgage was less than 30% of your income. That would still be affordable housing for you.
So in theory, many of us may be in affordable housing.
Correct. So affordable housing can apply to anybody.
Gotcha.
But of all of these, only one of them requires income verification. I'm just letting that sink in for a second because it's an important bit here. Only low-income housing requires income verification. So when we talk about all of these different AMI levels, it is only when we are talking about low-income housing that we are talking about people who are submitting their financial records, their pay stubs to the housing authority, who get a voucher, and that is, and if they make too much, they can be removed from low-income housing. You can make too much to stay there. Permanent supportive housing, that which exists between 0 and 30% of AMI, is housing that you can never be removed from. It's permanent. But that is a very small subsection of housing and a very difficult one to acquire. But just, again, trying to get everybody's head around these different terms and getting alignment.
And Parker, that income verification is because of the federal laws that are tethered to that type of housing, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So just keep that in your mind as we go forward when we talk about AMIs. So pre-leasing. I have come to realize after many discussions that pre-leasing is probably the most powerful thing that we can be, activity we can be engaging in. And what pre-leasing means at the workforce housing level is it is the driver of what gets built. If you want to build that workforce housing, you must form the partnership with the employer. And what I've been told from developers is any amount of pre-leasing that we can accomplish, they will build it. If we can present to a developer a stack of 35 pre-lease intent to pre-leases, they will be able to convert that into housing. Workforce housing is not the most profitable thing that most developers can be doing. And one of the big problems is that it's a risky endeavor because you are not doing the most profitable thing. Banks don't like that. And so how we help these guys mitigate this risk is to present them with the idea that there will be no vacancy in this project. And what that does for investment over time is make it look really good. So we had a meeting with Dan Stranger, Commissioner Scar and I, and Mr. Stranger has been very successful in the workforce housing field, one of the most successful people in it. And when I asked him what he thought the most important thing I could do to help workforce housing, he said it was pre-leasing. And this guy really knows his stuff. So when he told me that, I really started taking a hard look at how we do this. I booked an appointment with the county attorney to talk about this. And I think this is some important stuff that we will be participating in. So I'd like to share with you how I envision the Housing Commission participating in this, and I would love to get your feedback on it. So we cannot go out and present pre-lease agreements. That would be way too much. That would be asking them to sign a binding agreement, and we are the Housing Commission, not really what we do. But what we can do is go out and form coalitions of employers to be interested in pre-leasing and say, if it existed today, the housing that my organization would be willing to lease would be X units at X rent. And that's all we need them to, that's the information we need more than anything. So we need to go to places like Adventist, Zwald, the Smoker, Creamery, and we need them to say, Not I need housing, not I have workers that don't have housing, but here is what I will do. Here's what I can commit, or I want to commit to, is I want to lease 10 units at $1,500, and I will lease them for 3 years, and I will put my employees in there. And once that happens, we would then take that information, pass it to the developer who is developing a project that is in line with what has been described from that company. We make the connection. The developer will offer them the official, actual binding pre-lease agreement. And then the magic happens. Because here's why workforce housing is so helpful in our community and anywhere. Is once that organization, let's say it's Adventist for the purpose of this discussion, once they get those 10 units pre-leased and they put their employees in them, when the employee is charged rent, it is charged pre-tax.
For whom?
For the employee.
Oh.
Which means that when you are in workforce housing, 30% more of your rent will stay in your pocket as the employee.
So your gross becomes adjusted for taxes once your rent has been removed by your employer.
Where does that come from?
What?
Yeah.
What is, I mean, I know that happens with health insurance costs, right? But where does that come from?
Steve, you want to chime in on that?
And Michelle.
As,
And Michelle?
as best I can.
Yeah.
I just, from where I lived previously in Chicago, there were organizations that did master leases where they would take out blocks of units in new developments, and then the employers would lease these units to their employees pre-tax. So it came out of their check, but they weren't taxed on it. So a $1,500 a month unit really was costing them $1,375, right, at the end of the day, because they're saving that tax hit. So I hope that makes sense.
This is not a program. This is just code.
What's happening?
It's not a program. It's really, it's up to the individual employer, and through
Because Steve, essentially what's happening is the employer is paying the tax on that money before it passes to the employee, right?
Exactly, kind of like any kind of like healthcare savings fund or anything like that. And the advantage for the employer is obviously they have locked up housing, right? They know they can continue to grow their business, hire employees. They've got this block of apartments they control. They've got a master lease. For us, we just get, Adventist just writes us one check, right? It's really easy for us. We know we've got the 3-year commitment. We can have that in our underwriting. We're not worrying, and the banks love it. The private capital that we have to go out and get for these projects, because banks are really not an option right now for constructions, and they love that. They want to see the pre-leasing. It's like if I can bring a project to them where it's permitted, we own the dirt, and we've pre-leased it, it's like we've removed all the hurdles for them, and they feel very comfortable writing a check and knowing that, in approximately 14 to 16 months, we'll be getting our permanent financing in place, we'll be leased up, and they'll get their money back, plus maybe a small interest on their money. So.
And Michelle, I'll let you go in 1 second, but I just wanted to say that when Dan described this, he said that a fully pre-leased workforce housing development has the best J curve of any investment you can make in real estate. And a J curve is, you have to just imagine that when you start building a housing development, your costs make your profit go way down. And then they start coming back up once it's rented up and you have income coming in. And over a long enough period, the J curve on workforce housing is the best real estate investment you can make. And that was told to me by somebody who's made $1 billion investing in real estate. So I'm really trying to have you guys see what a powerful tool having a building pre-leased is, and how this is the activity that we could probably do that will contribute the most to bringing the type of housing we need the most here. And then I know, Michelle, you had a question, so I'm sorry for continuing to talk.
No, I took my hand down because I really am trying to, I'm trying to debate how I want to phrase this, but I think we need to, this is an amazing tool and it may be more difficult to implement than the ideal scenario. Just using my own organization as an example, we have a lot of existing leases and we own some buildings that we put that we provide housing. And for the most part, we really use that for skilled roles, providers, nurses, travelers, you know, that we need, we can't see our patients if we don't have these positions filled. So those are prioritized. We still have a lot of other people that need to work for us, that we have open positions and they're going to need housing when they come into the community. I'm not sure that we are in a financial position to be pre-leasing, and I think we're not alone in this, to be pre-leasing massive, and I'm not sure that the average, especially a company like ours that's part of a larger corporate system that we don't get to call all of our own shots and do things our own way. So I almost envision this potentially being a better scenario for a smaller enterprise, and not the large employers, and there would have to be more of them. I think that the reality is businesses would like to sign on in theory to say we would support pre-leasing, knowing that when the individuals come into the community that need the housing or when they're already here, those units are going to get leased. I mean, they're going to get rented immediately. There'll be a waiting list. So I don't know if there's a scenario where there's not that level of financial commitment on the part of the I'm not sure that there's going to be that many businesses that can really pre-lease in the context that is being laid out here. I think to say, yes, we know we're going to have a workforce that will rent these. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if that's helpful. I mean, it's probably not. That's why I wasn't going to say anything, but I know I did. So there you go.
That's the difference between need on paper and need in reality, is getting that commitment is the different. Basically, we're at a place where we have heard from businesses over and over again that housing is a key impediment to their continued success. And we can fix that if they can commit to some of this, but they have to be able to eventually actually commit with that developer agreement for a pre-lease. That is how workforce housing gets built. Otherwise, nobody will build housing. Nobody will lend to builders to build housing at these income levels. It won't, we can't. There's no way to, unless there's not enough public funding out there for this income range to be able to accomplish it.
I just want to make sure I understand how the rent is pre-taxed. So are you saying that the real rent is like $1,300 a month, but the tenant will be charged $1,500 a month because they're paying for the tax?
I think that in this
Or is it
scenario,
the
the
other way around?
employer is paying the lease and then they deduct it from an employee's paycheck pre-tax. So the employer is really the person who's paying the apartment
Higher.
rent. And they're paying whatever the full rent is.
So the employee pays $1,300.
It just comes out of their paycheck. I, as an employer too, have like some of the same concerns Michelle has. I would have to think long and hard about it.
It is the trade-off that you make for getting guaranteed housing for your employees.
Yeah,
It's the
so,
cost of doing business, what it is.
Heather at Swald would be a good person to connect with because they built some dorms, they built some employee housing and there are pros and cons to what they did.
There are cons to this.
Yeah.
And one of them is that as we support this, we need to understand that we're creating housing situations where people could lose their job and their home in the same day.
And I guess that was to my point, or what something I was thinking about too is, as an employee taking a job, would I really want to tie myself lock myself into an employer provided housing when I pay a few extra dollars and have guaranteed housing that's not tied to my employer. And I think that would, I mean, honestly, I would be somewhat uncomfortable having the employer provided housing regardless of how long I work there. Because that's, please, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to chime in real quick. I'm just saying that's not the only route here. It's just I've seen it done, and I've seen it done mostly in the healthcare environment where you've got specialists coming into town for short periods of time, and you know the hospital just needs to have 4 apartments that they've just got locked out, right? And one week it's a cardiologist, you know, the next week it's whoever. So I don't think it applies to everyone, you know, and I don't think that's, you know, Parker and I, when we've talked about this, our intent is not to go out and push like pre-leasing, pre-tax program to anyone at all. That's up to them. It's just something that might work for their employees because it puts a little more money in their pocket, and that's good for the community. So they have more spending power, right? It's like a whole loop, if you will. But I think, you know, initially we just need what we need, and what every workforce developer needs is just commitments, just to know that we're building this housing, we're tying it at, you know, none of our apartments are over 100% AMI. We're all in that 90 to 100% AMI. So, and that is because it's 2 things, right? It's one that gets us the tax abatement credit from the county, which makes this project pencil. And then the other reason is when we've been reaching out and talking to Parker, and I've been talking to a couple of hospitals. We talked to the school district. We've come to realize, you know, most of these folks don't make enough to hit 120 AMI. We really have to be at 100 or less to confidently rent these units. So you know, and you know, if people decide to move on, I mean, I guess as an owner, I'm not particularly worried that we would be able to lease these again. I think the need is so, you know, out the door around the block that it's not a concern while we lease these up. It's more about, I guess for me, it's kind of a selfish thing because I've mentioned to Parker, I come from a family of educators and healthcare workers. So I really believe that these people need this housing, you know, almost more than anyone else right now. And I'm trying to reach out to these groups and gauge their interest and give them the opportunity to have right of first refusal, if you will, and say, yes, we want 4 apartments. We, you know, our nurses need this, you know, this, and I know just from my experience in my family and some of my other friends who are in the healthcare industry, healthcare workers actually kind of like to live together in communities because they're all kind of on a similar schedule, and you know they kind of like it quiet. And I think this location in Manzanita is pretty perfect for that, honestly. You know, it's kind of ideal.
Thanks, Steve. Michelle?
Yeah, I think the scenario that I can envision, and I think you referred to this earlier, Parker, so this is a question and maybe a confirmation, is pool, having employers be part of a pool where but they're not actually the ones paying for the rent, but there's a pool of apartments that are available as they have workforce iterations coming and going and needs that they've committed to covering. I don't know how that would work financially, but I just feel like it needs to be pretty flexible for it to work. And I'm curious what the pool scenario looks like, I guess is the question.
I think that's a great transition to me talking about some of the key challenges here.
And Parker, I think it would be helpful too if you explain, because the Housing Commission will not be the brokers or the negotiators for these pre-development agreements. So what would the Housing Commission's role be in this?
The Housing Commission's role in this would be seeking non-binding letters of intent or letters of interest that would be the employers signifying that they would in the future like to talk with the developer about an actual pre-lease agreement. We don't do any binding anything. All we do is basically get a form that says, here are the number of units of housing at the rent that we need for my organization. And then we hand that off to developers and they will take it from there. Those were, I just listed all of my next steps, essentially. Develop pre-leasing intake, and that's that non-binding interest form I'm talking about.
So can I make a clarification to
Sure.
that? So really, it's the Housing Commission, you talk a lot about wanting to engage and do something where you can have that direct outreach to major employers and to others. So your role would be, you know, we'd love to talk to you about this option for pre-leasing. There are developers that would love to come to our county, but they need a commitment. Can we talk about what your needs are so that I can better understand how many units you might need to help, you know, house your employees and address your workforce needs? And if you're interested, you know, we have this non-binding form that really just affirms your need that we would love to pass on to a developer, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
For my side is, oh, that's exactly what I was gonna just say.
Yeah.
If I could get a LOI onto how many houses Michelle might need, or the Creamery might need, or Stinson's might need, I can go get the funding.
And that's often enough.
Yeah, and this is major employee,
Well,
or is
Because
because,
matter,
You know,
if you guys
that's-
have a restaurant association, that would be,
that's one of the challenges that we have here. We have two challenges here. We live in a small community and most of the developers who are at scale and building larger things are coming in from outside of this community, which means that they don't have personal connections to the employers in the area. That's why it's so important for the Housing Commission to step in. You guys know the area, you know the people, you know the businesses, and you can get those conversations happening where these guys cannot. And so that is why it's such a powerful tool, is that we are out there in the community and we can build these groups. But you're right, everybody is basically bringing up the same problem. And that is that, man, I thought I had this to the right spot. I want employment. Pardon me, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and go and find the right thing there. But this is, oh, here it is, perfect.
I think Steve had another comment as well.
All right, give me 1 sec. Steve, you go ahead and I'll get this set up.
I just wanted to mention real quick, you know, developers in general, when they go to an area they don't know, they go on like a site like CoStar, and where they gather data about the area to try to figure out, you know, what are the average rents, you know, what's the density, you know, just information about the community they're thinking about building it. And the problem with a lot of small communities like Tillamook is there is no data, because nothing has been built in the last 20 years. So they're kind of coming into this, they're coming into this blind, right? And they're like, okay, you want us to build this, it's super risky. Can you prove that there's a need? And that's what Parker is doing here with his outreach. He's coming back and saying, hey, here's a spreadsheet I put together. Here are all the businesses. You know, this one needs 10, this one needs 8, this one needs 4. And guess what? This now totals 130 units of people. And then these developers are like, okay, great. This is what we need to see. Now we can turn to our capital partners and say, hey, we just need to build this. It will be leased up. And that's how the wheels get moving.
A fully leased up workforce housing unit is the best J curve in real estate. That's what this keeps coming back to. So who are the people that we need to reach out to? Who, you know, we see that healthcare and social assistance is 13% of the workforce here. Manufacturing is another big one at 11%. Retail trade. And honestly, this is a really great website, datausa.io, because I know you guys can't see it from all the way over there, but when you hover over these, you get the median earnings for each of these industries. And you can then go and look at your AMI chart and find out what they need. So retail trade, median earning is $65,436. So if we want housing for retail and trade, then we would want a certain number of letters of intent for pre-leasing. at rent that could be afforded by that industry. And similarly, public administration has one of the higher median in earnings. So maybe they already have housing and that would not be the right place to start our search for pre-leasing agreements. But one of the hardest ones, the one that everybody talks about here, is accommodation and food services. So here's the challenge. Their median earnings are $46,480.
At the cusp.
And they are also seasonal employees. These are people who are needed at different times of year and not. And so this is a big challenge. And this is a place that we'll have to continue to be very creative on.
I recently went to an oil meeting. They can tell you this is the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association. This is a big topic for them, very important. They would definitely be someone to reach out to. And it also poses a question of, would they be willing to give up a little of their 70% for these kind of projects?
Yep.
On the kind of guarantee, because they could do that. They could call that they could call that an amenity. But the restaurants, there's a lot of, like Moe's Seafood they bought a motel in Cannon Beach and they're doing, so that's another group that, like you said, the challenges that'll make money.
And there's not one big restaurant like Moe's in Tillamook to take down a whole motel. So there again, the Housing Commission needs to step in and build those coalitions of restaurants or reach out to the restaurant associations. If we want to provide housing that this type of housing that everybody says we need. So that's our big challenge. Michelle?
Yeah, I'm curious. So back to what Steve was saying, we have a lot of openings, but we don't know that those are open because we don't have housing for the employees without them telling us. And it's not something that we ask necessarily. And like our hiring doesn't happen at the local level because of our corporate enterprise. So I think I want to make sure that I'm not sounding like Debbie Downer today, because if you know me, I'm always looking for the solutions, but I do want us to be realistic because we can't solve this if we aren't being realistic. So, is a good proxy for that just the number of openings that businesses have? Because I think to go to businesses and say, how many workforce housing, units do you need? I don't know that any of our businesses could answer that. They could tell you how many positions they have open that are chronically open. And I think it's a proxy for housing, but I don't know.
Well, and that's the problem, is that workforce housing developers cannot afford to absorb that risk. And if we want workforce housing, the employers are going to have to step up to absorb that risk, because otherwise it will not get built. The banks won't lend. We can't guarantee that they will get filled up. Why would anybody put that much risk into the not most profitable thing that I could be doing with my capital, Kristen?
Isn't it true that all of the recent developments that have been built here for workforce housing and affordable housing, I don't know if I'm using the terms right, have rented immediately with long waiting lists?
Well, I can answer some of this, but
I just wanted, I spoke with a developer. He said he struggled to find financing on this third go round. He had built 2 other market-based apartment complexes, fully leased up, still struggled with financing to get the third project on the ground. Even though he had a great proven track record, successful full occupancy, the banks were still hesitant until he showed them the numbers.
That is important for the financing.
Correct.
Because we know that they're gonna rent right away
So
with a long waiting list.
pop quiz. Kingfisher Apartments, what kind of housing?
Yeah,
Is it?
I don't remember the.
Underneath on it.
Middle, or is it market?
That's middle income housing. That's 80 to 120% restricted housing. And it's also a bit of workforce housing because some of the people who built that housing ended up leasing it pre-leasing it themselves, not
Yes.
through their business,
Yes.
but the drywaller and the electrician, I
Yes.
believe, while working on it, said, I want to live here, and they went ahead and pre-leased their units. And that was in a different financial environment than we are in now. That was a lot looser money back then. To make Kingfisher happen today, we would have to find a pre-lease for every single unit there. And I can tell you that Kevin Scholke did not open those doors and be immediately full occupancy. He's still working on stabilization. Stabilization is what they call it when you still have vacancies popping up. So there are some pretty challenges to getting this level of housing built, and I'm really trying to drive that home today. I agree with Michelle, this is hard. This is the housing crisis. Like this challenge is the housing crisis. We can't build, we can't finance what we need for housing because it's too risky. And we can't guarantee that people can pay the rents. So the only way we can get, not the only way, I know Steve will get upset with me if I say the only way. A powerful way that we can help get this done is by removing that risk. That's our lever from our standpoint. It's the most effective thing that we can be doing is trying to find businesses, even if it's one restaurant and one unit, even if it's one librarian, like we can gather these stacks and build it out and pass it to these developers who can go and make it happen. But it's going to be hard, and it's not fair that we have to do this. In an ideal world, in a housing market that was balanced and healthy, we would not be performing these activities. This would be a silly idea, but in our current reality, this is the lever we have to lean on right now.
But I thought the whole point of becoming a pass-through for some other agencies is to increase the funding that we can offer, which is another route to channeling public funding into these kinds of projects.
And honestly, every single affordable housing project that has been built in Tillamook has been 100% publicly funded. It's low-income housing tax credits, it's LIFT grants, and things like that. And at that level of housing, there are financial mechanisms. There's us, there's low-income housing tax credits, there's other things. But once we graduate into workforce level, middle-income housing, we lose a lot of that. And even if we maxed out all of the resources we are chasing for pass-through funding, the most we could hope to offer right now is 40,000. Let's see, if one developer got all of the resources passed, wowed us so much that we were like, here's the whole pot on our next round of housing fund, and we're going to help, and they get all of the EPA funding and they get all of the OFA. What they've received is a $500,000 loan at 0.5% to 3% for roughly 6 months and $40,000 per unit. Steve, does that get you there, or do you still need financing?
No, that does not get us there. and I've shared my underwriting with Parker in detail, which something I don't normally do, but I feel like it's important for him to just see the exercise we go through to try to make this happen. It's really tough, and we've waived our fees out of the project to get this to pencil. We've waived our architecture fee out of the project to get it pencil. We've removed our back end fee that we would collect for doing the project. I mean, not to sound like, I'm on a mission here, but it's like I kind of feel like I'm on a mission because there's really nothing, there's so little profit for us at this point, and we're just trying to get it over the line. And the reason we're doing that is because, we strongly believe that in doing this first phase, improving it and building this beautiful project, it is going to show not only your county, but other counties what can be done and how we do this and how we have to include local businesses, county, state funding, just all of it and how we built our stack. I mean, we're kind of building this plane as we're flying it, basically.
Thanks, Steve. I know Michelle had another comment.
Yeah, I'll end with this other than the report that comes later, because I know you're probably getting close on the agenda, but to end on a positive note, I really do think that there are employers out there, and likely the smaller ones. I'm thinking of Garibaldi Bistro. I think they would be open more hours if they had more staffing. And I think that having the certainty of having housing would benefit both the employer and the employee in such a way that it would be very enticing to a small employer to enter into this. It's a win-win-win with the pre-leasing and the tax pre-tax income for the employee, and a small employer is going to totally understand that. This is what farmers do. This is why there are housing on farms, because that is exactly how it works. And that's why people, it's advantage to everybody to do it that way. It works. But so part of it is helping people understand how and why it works, and finding the right employers that they really are hungry for that level of stability and security. And there are employees that would seek it out too. It just may be that we have to find a lot more individual businesses than going after the bigger ones, because I think it might be more complicated. It's going to be a lot of legwork, but I think it actually might be a better strategy. And I think it's worth doing.
Yeah.
Well, pre-leasing is something we will be talking about in every single committee this coming month. And is something that we'll be talking a lot about going forward in general, and how we can best support these activities and what the Housing Commission feels the best, highest use of our efforts can be. So with that, unless there's any other comments on pre-leasing at this time, I'm gonna move us over to new business. The press release will be going out, or has gone out, from the commissioner's office for the new 5 seats that are open on the Housing Commission. That means that I will be tapping some of you for interviews coming up. So I will, as soon as I have the interview scheduled, as we get applications back from potential new housing commissioners, I will be sending out emails asking for people to join for interviews of new housing commission members. I believe we wrote the press release to close the application period on June 21st. So if there are anybody listening, or there's anybody that you would like to apply, the application is on the county website, and I will be sending out the press release as soon as the commissioner's office executes it. The next is the July 4th Housing Commission meeting. We finally got there. So you guys know that we have a lot of stuff ahead of us. You have an idea of what we need to do. I will leave it to you to have a discussion on what you would like to do with the July 4th Housing Commission meeting.
As in terms of, would you like to reschedule? Would you like to focus on subcommittee work and reconvene in August?
And Dave, you got a comment here?
Oh, I was just going to make a motion. We cancel the July 4th meeting and reconvene in August.
You know, given the amount of work we've got and the opportunities we're looking at, I'd like to see us meet in July. I think there's a lot to be done, and I would hate to wait till August to move forward here. So my vote would be to reschedule our July meeting.
I would offer a middle of the road solution, that if a less than quorum group would like to meet in July, we could have a special meeting to focus on specific topics, such as pre-leasing or other activities. Again, just a suggestion.
We would still publicly notice
We
it,
would still, yeah.
but we would just need to do it a week before the meeting.
So that's an option as well.
Yeah. Like the second week in July or something.
So like 7 days after the 4th would be the 11th, or?
It doesn't matter when it could be. It could be any time, but we would just publicly notice it a week ahead of time.
Right. So do folks have their calendars available with them, or would you like Parker to send out a doodle poll to get an idea of when that meeting could take place in July?
And I think that what we could do is, if there was a date in July that we could establish a quorum, that we could then meet. But if we do not find one, then we could switch to the people who have the most, greatest number of availability, and have a special task force style meeting on some of these topics.
And that could be in person or just online.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to see a full commission hearing. We've got so much going on. We've got a person who's applying for membership here, or to serve, who's a banker. She helped fund the project in Pacific City, so she's ready to go. She's got some great insight into what's available now in funding. Let's get her on board and get and meet and move forward here. So I'd like to see a full commission meeting in July.
I'm open to that.
But not on 4th of July. Yeah, I'd be willing to support a full meeting. Yeah.
Okay, then I will send out a doodle poll, and if we fail to find a date that has that would have a quorum, I will send it out again and see if we get it on the second try.
Well, there's a lot of time in July. Could maybe pick the second week
Yeah,
and
I
try that, because then you'll have less.
I'll send out a
options.
doodle poll for all 5 days of the second week of July. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and then we'll check on room availability too.
Yeah, and if we have to find a different place, we can.
I'll rescind my motion. Or, well, I guess it would be the motion to cancel the July 4th meeting and reschedule for the second week of July.
I appreciate you shooting your shot. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, we have settled that. That is everything for the housing coordinator updates. And
May I add something to that?
absolutely.
So as you know, speaking of housing and leasing, Senate Bill 406, so I'm working with all of the cities on implementation of 406 and with our communities. I will be hosting with our consulting team a special planning commission meeting on June 27th at 6 p.m. That will be here. And the consultants and I will be making a presentation to the planning commission on Senate Bill 406, what the process is going to look like. This will be kind of a prep for them to get ready, inviting Housing Commission, the cities, the unincorporated communities to attend this meeting. It will be here. And we will do it in the same format as the Housing Commission meeting. So if you'd like to just listen in and attend virtually, you are most welcome to do so. But that is the 27th here at 6 o'clock.
So it's not just for the county, the unincorporated.
No, it's the informative discussion with the planning commission. The cities are putting their own schedules together of when they would like to do that with their planning commissions. I'm the first one out the chute. So decided to go ahead and get our planning commission, start that preparation process with them. Because ultimately, all of our planning commissions make the recommendation for those ordinance updates to the decision makers, which are the city councils or the board of county commissioners, right? Depending on location. So for me, this is an opportunity to have them start preparing and essentially a training session of what this is, what the expectation is, what can you expect, what is your role, what am I doing with unincorporated communities to get this started, what the consulting team will be doing, so that when we finally get to hearings, they are prepared. But it will be a very informative process that I think will benefit everyone who's interested in knowing more about 406 and how this is going to move forward. So you're most welcome. We'd love to see you either in person or online. And the link will be on the DCD homepage. It's actually the same link as the Housing Commission meeting, because we have too many meetings to keep track of multiple links. So, but I'll put it at the top because folks may not realize it's the same.
And then before we completely move off me, just one other bit of the other document in your packet is HUD's fair market rent documentation for Tillamook County. And I will leave it to you to see what HUD feels fair market is in the county versus AMI versus what's actually out there and available. And you guys can draw your own conclusions. Aside from that, I think that is all new business I have to share. Is there any comments or questions about anything that I've gone over before we move off into committee updates?
Stop sharing your screen.
Oh, yeah, I do. Thank you. Super deal.
Thank you.
This is, hey Parker, it's Steve here with Maker. I can stay on the meeting if you guys still need me. Otherwise, I'll probably bounce, but I'm here if you want to ask me any more questions, if anyone has any questions.
I think we're good. You go enjoy the beautiful day.
I will try. Thanks, man. Take care.
First up is outreach. Michelle, do you have-
Michelle, you still on?
Yeah. Let's see here, and I have my notes in here somewhere. Okay, so for outreach, I'll just start by saying we haven't met since the last meeting because we switched or it's possible that we did and I wasn't able to be there. So, but we switched our meeting day to be more relevant to it's strategically timed with the commission meetings so that we can act in a more timely manner. We were meeting at the end of the month. We'll be meeting on the second week going forward. So we'll be meeting next week. But what we've been working on in the meantime is streamlining our process for social media content development, and we're getting more content posted now. So please keep an eye on that and be sure and share those when you see them. We are also bringing more of a focus on ADUs, largely with that social media content. And we're working with the finance chair on targeted outreach for the USDA tax credit program. And we have a potential candidate identified. Mark is continuing to work with the Manzanita City Council on some of the advocacy, and then that is it. And I'll turn it over to my other committee members if there's anything else to add to that.
I would add that there is now actually 2 potential targets for the farm worker housing tax credit, as somebody was in our office getting a plan review for on-farm house dwelling. So I heard that pop downstairs and shared with them the good news about the agricultural workforce housing tax credits. And I gave them all of the materials, and I expect them back in my office next week to talk more about it.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. You want me to go ahead and finance?
Sure.
Yeah, so with regard to the ag workers housing tax credit, we made a presentation at our last meeting talking about it, and it's a remarkable credit. It's just almost too good to be true. The one thing that I was concerned about was the message I was getting from the state was that this credit was subject to the discretion of the state staff, meaning that it may not always be a 50% credit. Maybe it's going to be a 40% credit, 35% credit. That's what I understood them to say. In subsequent discussions with them, I've learned that their point is that if there's a shortage of credits, then the amount of credit might be subject to staff discretion. Otherwise, it is a 50% credit. As you may remember, there's an on-farm credit and basically an off-farm credit. And there's just enough confusion, at least on my part, as to exactly how this works. The thought was, let's find someone to do a test run on. If we can find a farmer who has an on-farm type project that they're proposing, let's run it through with the state, because with on-farm projects, there's only a 3-week review period versus the community-based or off-farm program. That's a 5-month review and a typical period. Temporary housing. That's right. So we really didn't want to go out to the local farmers, and Michelle and I have talked about this, discussing this potentially fantastic credit if we really don't understand it, and perhaps it doesn't work in the way that we think it will. So yes, if we could find someone to run through this as a test case, and we find that it does work the way they're telling us it does, then we're ready to go, I think, to roll this out on a bigger basis.
And then we get the megaphone.
Dave, can you, so we have a special permitting process for any dwelling in the farm zone, including farm worker, farm help dwellings. It's streamlined, but nonetheless, the state, they audit us, they require us to do all this work because it's not residential zones, it's farm zones. So you have to demonstrate you meet those criteria to put a farm help dwelling in a farm zone. Does this, so we have them all, right? Pretty much. Can this apply to homes that already exist as farm help dwellings, or is it only for new construction?
It's really more the acquisition costs of additional construction. We have to be new. Yeah, but the farmer already owns the.
That's what I'm asking, because I'm wondering if you find out that this actually is as good as you think it is. If I gave Parker the land use approval list of all of these farm help dwellings, could we then send them a letter and say, hey, there's an opportunity that might exist for you?
I don't think so, except maybe for some remodeling or
Okay.
rebuilding of the structure, that would probably qualify.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's generating new units is the goal, like our housing fund, so we need new doors.
Okay. But if someone had a farm help dwelling, and let's say it was an older mobile home, common scenario, they decide to remove it and replace it,
Yeah.
then that would apply.
Then yes,
Okay, so I'm gonna talk to planning staff about that. I want to make sure as we see those, we start tracking those and let you know right away.
yep.
Okay,
And I think that avenue might be some of the best for getting out some of this information, especially for these new programs, things that are untested.
Yeah.
Wait for someone to walk through the door and trying to build the thing that it applies to, and then I come running downstairs for good news.
well, it also might incentivize because, we all want the best available housing. But if maybe a farm operator has housing that they would love to replace, but it doesn't pencil out for them, if we put something together that says, should you choose to replace this in the future, there's this opportunity for a tax credit relief that might incentivize them to look at replacing those units a little bit faster.
There could also be a scenario where a farmer is retiring and would like to move their off-farm housing. And that could potentially open up for a different farmer to come and purchase it from them. And possibly we could get these tax credits to apply.
If it was like MD or something and they moved it from
And
one
it
site to the
needed
other.
renovation, or if it needed to be torn down and remodeled, or.
That happens
Interesting.
all the time.
So-
We permit those routinely.
Yeah.
So there might be some shenanigans that we could pull to get some of this to apply.
You tell me what shenanigans we can pull and I'll start making the list.
Well, for somebody who's thinking about buying a farm that's got farm worker housing on it, that would also presumably qualify. for-
Because they would be the new owner.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That happens on occasion, or we're seeing a lot of farm acquisitions.
Yeah.
Where farms are merging.
Mhm.
So that might be something,
Yeah, we will have to dig
Yeah.
into what the minimum trigger is on this.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you give me some, then I'll start running scenarios by you.
And I'll see how it goes with this, for the farmers I've engaged with so far.
Yeah.
That's great. And as you may remember, the definition of an egg worker is very broad. We also recently learned, for example, that truck drivers who drive raw milk trucks qualify as ag workers as long as this truck driver is involved in the transfer process from the on-farm bulk tank to the truck. As long as.
Oh.
They have to plug the hose in, and then they're an ag worker.
Then they're an ag worker. And that means then that if the trucking company has land that they want to put some worker housing on, that's on-farm housing. And we're back to a 2 to 3 week approval period.
So it doesn't have to qualify as a farm help dwelling through a permitting process. There's a different definition.
Cultural worker. And not for on-farm. The on-farm and off-farm finance programs are all through the USDA
Yeah.
and are so dang complicated that they are a specialist industry. You need a specialist to access USDA farm worker housing stuff. I've sat in on those meetings long enough to be like, oh boy, I would need an entire degree in this to help. So,
But with all the farms we've got around here, we need to be specialists ourselves.
yeah, and
we're getting there.
well, and there are USDA representatives already existing who will take a farmer and walk them through the process. That is the service that the USDA provides, and we have a regional rep who would do that. So, I'm learning a lot.
We all are, yeah. Okay, other finance committee updates. The county just recently went through its budget process, or is going through the budgeting process. And through that process, we asked some questions about our dear little Fund 122, our workforce housing fund, which appeared to have a lot of extra cash in it that was accumulating and not being spent on workforce housing. And the answer we finally got back was, they found some sheriff's department, public safety
The
funds.
public safety fund.
Public safety funds within that fund. And so that really is not our money. There's several $100,000 in there that appear to be excess funds that does not exist for that reason.
To be clear, when the fee that fills our coffers is collected, 75% of it goes into.
The housing and 25% is public safety. So this coming fiscal year, so what we did is the public safety piece has not been developed yet. And remember, that includes the exemption, property tax exemption coverage for the fire districts. It includes the contract costs for the hearings officer, for the short-term rental program, different things, enforcement. A chunk of that is going to the sheriff's office to help fund deputy patrol for the next this coming fiscal year, because they are helping us actively engage with short-term rental calls on evenings and weekends. So we want to support that work. So to Dave's point, yes, we put all of the short-term rental operator license fee into 122. But the only pieces of it that have been touched, because that structure is set up, is the housing, the 75% housing fund.
What are they waiting for? They're constantly clamoring for funding. Why don't they use the 25% piling up?
Well, so a couple of reasons. One, I have to commit that part of that at least to short-term rental enforcement, right? Because it's a short-term rental operator license fee. So the public safety element, there's an expectation of communities that we're going to use part of those resources to help respond to enforcement of the short-term rental program. To get the property, so Commissioner Scar, Commissioner Bartline, myself, John Southgate, if you remember him, and Jake worked together to design the property tax exemption program. It's been tweaked here and there over time, but when I was going to districts and talking to them about the exemption program, the fire districts were not supportive of the program. And the reason why was because they were very concerned that they would not be able to collect the tax revenue they needed to operate their district with an influx of housing. And so that whole public safety element was initially created for short-term rental enforcement. And when a property tax exemption came online, that revenue that would have gone to the fire district, if that apartment or that housing structure was on the tax roll, we will use a portion of those funds now to supplement the fire district until that exemption is over and has expired. So the reason why it's not all going out the door is because that 25% is intentionally earmarked for different things, which was how, one, I got the property tax exemption to get through hearings without it being opposed or challenged. And two, in creating the short-term rental operator license fee, which you can imagine the owners of those rentals were not thrilled about that fee at all. I had to give them something back with those funds. So that's how that split occurred. And that's why it's not all flying out the doors, because I have made commitments and obligations that are reflected in the board order for that fee.
And ideally, those funds should be in a separate fund.
Yes, and they will be moving.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You're 100% right.
That'll help.
It will help a lot. It'll help us all, Dave.
Okay, last item for you, just quickly. You may remember that with regard to our multifamily housing fund, those awards, as they go out to the award recipients, are taxable in the year the money is received if it is characterized as a gift as opposed to a loan. And so we'd love to characterize these and document these as loans. We're having some administrative issues with regard to how do we make that happen? How do we report that on an annual basis each year as the loans are forgiven? As these housing projects meet the minimum income requirements and so on. So we had a proposal from Colfax saying that they could do that administration work for us. It looked like the price was pretty high. Park has been kind of working with them trying to discuss or come up with a.
I'm going to be going back to them with a proposal that is what I've heard from the Housing Commission and from Commissioner Scar, is that we would like to engage with them, but we do not want these loans to go before their loan board. We would like to be the sole evaluator of them. I have also spoken to county council to make sure that I understand if there is, we want to know if that is exposing us to any type of risk. I don't think it is. And I will let you know what Colpack says. Is kind of where we're at.
So that's one option we have. We're looking at another option that might be available, an outside group that could do that administrative work, that backroom work for us. It might be less expensive. And so I'd like to give the commissioners a couple of options to choose from.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Development Committee did not meet this month because it was Memorial Day.
I do have an update though, speaking of development. So the rural residential ADU zoning amendments were adopted by the board in May. And they declared a state of an emergency because of our housing crisis. So those are in effect now.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the recreational vehicle citing proposal and standards have been tabled at this time. We're going to still work with Deschutes County. There were some valid questions that came up during that process that many of us have also had conversations about. So it's not entirely dead, but I need to do some more work before I bring it back.
Sarah, on the ADUs, is there gonna be some sort of acknowledgement on the permitting process that it's for an ADU or any sort of
Yes,
separation from a SFD or a studio, art studio, or some other
Yes.
guest home
And it will look,
with limitations?
everything will look different. The plans, the site plan, there's specific requirements tethered to an ADU.
Okay.
We have to look at them closely, at least until the new wildfire hazard maps are adopted by the state, because one of the requirements we have is that so this does not apply to communities. People are getting confused now because we're actually doing so much housing work so quickly. People are trying to figure out, okay, what applies where, right? So I'm only talking about ADUs for the rural residential zone, not anywhere else.
2 acre, more than 2
Minimum.
acre.
2 acre minimum, we put up those new regulations right after it was adopted. So if you go to the rural residential zone on our website, they're all there. But the state law is driving what we can and cannot do with these ADUs. So state law has predetermined what the minimums are. And we have not adopted anything beyond those minimums. But every ADU constructed in this zone until those wildfire maps are adopted by the state must be constructed with fire hardening materials. So that means all of these cool projects for, pre-manufactured, factory built, all of those good things, unless they were constructed with fire hardening materials, we cannot approve them.
That will expire though.
It will expire when the maps are adopted by the state. We still have to require the fire breaks, which is the defensible space around. We got to do some work with the fire departments, but the costs and the limitations until those maps are adopted concern me. Right, because it really, when you have to build with special, composite shingles and siding and all these other things that are fire hardening materials, that's a lot. So, we're watching and waiting for those maps to be adopted because that piece will be gone. Until then, we have to make sure it's done. But what I did too, when I was writing those regulations into the rural residential zone, I referenced the statute that requires those fire hardening materials because the fuel breaks and other things are also tethered to those. But I did not specifically outline that those fire hardening materials were required as a standard, because we know when those maps are adopted, that will not apply in Tillamook County. And I didn't want to have to go back in and do another process with another amendment that would take a couple of months just to pull that language out. So negotiated with DLCD and promised the moon and the stars that we would do our job to make sure that we are diligent in requiring that until those maps are adopted, and they let me do that. So I'm really thankful for that because I don't want to have to go back in.
Nice.
So, yeah, standards now, some will go away. We'll just keep at it. We've had a lot of traffic about it, which is great. But one of the things we are telling people is if you want to wait until those new maps are adopted, you will have more options for flexibility, materials, and different things. So we are having that honest conversation. So I expected, those that are interested will probably see them come in towards the end of the year instead of now, just simply because of the cost prohibitions.
And I have one other update. The last month I attended the Clatsop Regional Housing Task Force. That is our neighbor to the north, Housing Commission equivalent. And at that meeting was also my counterpart from Columbia County. And Columbia County is also pursuing the ADU, the rural residential ADU and the RV siting. So we will have another example if somebody is able to crack that egg.
Right, yeah, right now it's just us in Deschutes, so that would be great.
Right, but going forward, I see a lot of opportunity to work with our neighbors in the whole Colpack region, all the way down to Lincoln County on very specific housing initiatives. For instance, the timber industry crosses all of our county lines and has similar employers and would not want to do 3 different projects in 3 different counties. So there is a place where we could partner and it would affect all of us. And there's some other places like that we're hoping to collaborate a little bit more on. And so to that end, if anybody ever wants to go and represent Tillamook County up in Clatsop County at their meeting, I invite you to attend those meetings. I know the next, or probably August, I believe, we will be being visited by the Clatsop and Columbia County representatives. We're going to be trying to visit all of each other's meetings occasionally, provide support, share what we're up to, share the key successes and things that we have found that work. So hopefully by doing so, we can keep up that cooperation and find places to collaborate a little more effectively. That's all I have. The last thing that we need to maybe have a discussion about tabling is electing new officials for the Housing Commission.
Before you start that, I just wanted to, on the legislative,
Yeah.
we haven't met, but why you send out a doodle poll? Is it possible that you add the legislative committee rescheduling since June 19th? It's a holiday and that's our meeting date.
Yeah.
So if you could add the members of the legislative committee to your doodle list,
Yeah, I'll just create a separate one when I make that.
just to, so we can coordinate, because we really need to have a meeting this month.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. And please continue.
We are chairless at the moment. And we are also about to bring on a lot of new members. If this is an issue you would like to address now in July or after we bring in new members, I believe is the question before us to discuss.
So electing a new chair.
Electing a new chair, well, a new vice chair, if we like Terry. And then we would also need to find somebody else to chair the development committee. Are the 3 things we're looking for. I believe at least the development committee chair can wait until we bring on new development committee members, because we're a little lean at the moment. But I will leave that for you guys to discuss when the appropriate time to conduct that is. We do have a quorum, so it can be done today. Just barely.
I'd like to nominate Gary as our new chair.
I second that. If she's willing, yes.
I'm more than willing. Thank you.
Let's take a vote on that then. All in favor, say aye.
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 Megan, Michelle, congratulations. Gary.
Thanks.
Would we like to elect a new vice chair at this time?
I can nominate Mark as the vice chair.
Do I need to know how things work?
That's what you learned.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I second that.
That was fast.
We have motion and a second, but call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
I saw Dave say aye.
Yep.
All right.
Not too.
Well, that was fast. That was great.
That was wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You'll get your name tags. Anything else for the good of the order? Carrie, you want to invite public comment?
Oh, yes, at the very end of our meeting, anybody have any public comment? Online? Hearing none, all right, it's 11:03 or 4, and we're gonna, 11:06 per the computer, so we are gonna adjourn. Thank you guys, and we'll see you
Next month. at
next month.
undetermined times.
In the future.
Thank you.
You know,